Good evening and welcome. We come together this night to observe the annual Yom Hashoah commemoration sponsored by the Wichita Holocaust Memorial Council. My name is Sister Tarcisia Rhodes. I'm a member of the Newman University community, and we are honored to host this year's event. This is a sacred night, a night of remembering and mourning the victims of the Holocaust, a time for reflecting on one of humanity's darkest times in all of history, and the evils born out of hatred and violence. And it's a time to face our own obligation, to find the vision and courage to help to build a new world, promised in the words of the prophet Isaiah. The mountain of the Lord's house shall be established on the highest mountain and raised above the hills. All nations shall stream toward it. They shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. One nation shall not raise the sword against another, nor shall they train for war again. For this blessing, let us pray. O God, you brought forth life in all of its glorious manifestations and pronounced this creation good. Throughout all ages, we, your creatures, have marred this image of good and have allowed evils of hatred and violence to pervade our world and our hearts. We pray, O God, that you turn our hearts to you and to all others who come into our lives with love. Let us be your instruments of light, of love, of peace and justice in our own time. This we pray, O God, in your sacred name. Amen.
I am Wichita Mayor Brandon Whipple, and it's an honor to stand shoulder to shoulder with our Jewish community to denounce hatred and anti-Semitism throughout our nation and the world. The city of Wichita has issued a proclamation on April 27, 2022, proclaiming a day of remembrance in memory of the victims of the Holocaust.
Thank you, Mayor Whipple, and I hope you don't mind me saying, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate this proclamation. As we see, things have not changed. Things have remained the same throughout the years. The hatred that still goes on. So on behalf of the Wichita Jewish community and Jews throughout central Kansas, I accept this proclamation. Thank you.
And as we look at events unfolding throughout the world, let us never turn a blind eye to our history that shows how dark humanity can be. Let us always work towards a brighter future for our kids, and let us always acknowledge the shortcomings of our history so that hopefully we won't repeat them. Let us never forget the Holocaust and the terrors of the Holocaust, and let us make sure that we can create a world in which this remains in the past.
Thank you.
When someone comes in from the outside with the wind in their hair and the cold on their faces, I could bury myself in the blanket to stop myself from thinking. When will we be granted the privilege of smelling fresh air? I must keep my head high and be brave. If you have been been shut up for a year and a half. It can get too much for you some days. In spite of all justice and thankfulness, you can't crush your feelings. Cycling, dancing, whistling, looking out into the world, feeling young to know that I am free. That is what I long for, still it mustn't show. I couldn't talk about it to anyone, because then I know I should cry. Crying can bring such relief.
My name is Julie Fruhoff, the director of Mid-Kansas Jewish Federation, and I have the privilege of introducing Adela Dagerman, a Holocaust survivor. These are all personal to me since many of my grandparents' family members perished during the Holocaust. But this one is even more personal. Adela has been a part of my family for over 40 years. She is one of the sweetest, kindest people I have the pleasure of knowing. Adela Kraus grew up in Nyírbátor, Hungary, with her 6 brothers and 3 sisters. In 1944, when the Nazis invaded Hungary, Adela was 16 years old. Her family was briefly sent to a ghetto before being deported to Auschwitz-Birkenau. She and her sister Rose survived. After the liberation, Adela returned to Hungary, where she met and married her husband, Jack. The couple immigrated to the United States in 1949, settling in Kansas City. Her story is one of survival and hope.
Okay, would you give your name, please?
Adela Dagerman.
And could you tell where and when you were born?
I was born in 1928, March the 16th, and I was born in Hungary, in a small city named Nyírbátor.
Is there a large city that was close to?
It was close to Debrecen, which is a larger city.
And what was your maiden name?
Adela Kraus.
Could you start by talking about what your family life was like when you were before the war?
I had a beautiful family life. I come from a family of 10 children. And my mother and father were financially very comfortable. And
What did they do for a living?
my father was in the raw leather business. And I never thought that I would ever have anything happen but the best. Things changed.
What was your schooling like when you were a child?
I was still in school in 1944. Actually, tell the Seder, tell the week of Pesach. We had absolute no idea that we would ever be taken away from our home, because till the Germans came into Hungary, actually, the Hungarian Jewish people were not hurt, especially in small towns. This was about 20,000, the population. And as soon as they came to Hungary, that's when, end of the last day of Pesach, when we was noticed that we have to get ready to leave our homes.
And what year was that?
That was in 1944, approximately, sometime end of April.
And before that, if we can go back just a little bit first, was there ever any anti-Semitism in your community before the Nazis came?
We really never felt anything. We lived very comfortable, very much socially with everybody. And just a month before, we had someone from Poland come to our city. And I remember this when he said, he came in and I had an older brother and he told him that in Poland there is concentration camps and they take the girls, the young girls. And he told my mother that, and my mother got very upset. We didn't believe. Actually, we were very naive about everything.
So would you say that that was true with most of the Jews in your town, that they didn't believe what?
None of us believed. My father was an officer in the First World War, and he was an optimist, and he was a very bright man. And he said, nothing will happen to us. We had a lovely home, and we were very secure in our country. Till the Germans came in and we got notice that in 3 days we have to go to a ghetto, which was about 15, 20 miles from, maybe 25 miles from our city. And they came by trucks, and we could only take with us whatever in our hands. We had to leave everything behind.
And what was your understanding of what would happen to what you left
We
behind?
had no idea. When we got into the ghetto, the German soldiers was around at us. And that's when we really realized that we had problems. We got into barracks, and there was something that we had not believed, that it could be such a change coming from your home. There were no bathrooms. And I never forget, I was only 15, a little over 15, and we had to go to a public place, and the German soldiers watched us. And food was very rare, whatever they bring in, and that's where the tragedy started. And we were there about 4 weeks. And after 4 weeks, they were telling us that we're going to a working camp.
Like a labor camp?
Like a labor camp. And I never forgot, we had some sweets and cookies, and my mother and my father and all of us, brothers and sisters. I was the fourth one from the oldest one. We got into the wagon, and there was about one over other, each other. There just was no room to lay down or anything. And my father kept saying, children, we're going to a camp and we're going to be always together. I remember that. And I also remember 3 o'clock in the morning when we arrived to Auschwitz.
Let me ask you a few more questions about the ghetto and what your life was like there. You describe it as one common place. People didn't live separately.
No.
You lived in a barracks?
In a barracks.
Were the men and women separated?
Everyone together. And on the floors, we had, we just one next to each other. There was no privacy or anything.
But your family could be
But
together.
we were together,
All of you.
us.
And was there any other family besides your immediate family in that town that also was there?
They were all there. Everyone, there was about, I think, 1,000 Jewish people in our city, if I remember well, and everyone was there.
Were there cousins, aunts, uncles of yours?
Some of my family, yes, they were taken to different ghettos.
From the same town?
No,
From
different
different towns.
cities,
Uh-huh.
yeah. But my cousins, and they were there, yes.
Okay. What was it like during the daytime during this 4 weeks that you were in the ghetto? What did you do?
It was it was not too bad because we had no knowledge and we couldn't believe that it could get worse. We thought this is it, till the war is over. The worst part it was that we had no privacy as far as taking a bath or go to the bathroom. But we had enough food yet because most of the families brought bread and cakes and canned food. And they also give us enough. So it really wasn't anything as bad.
That's what was about to come. What, did they put you to work in any way? Or
Not in the ghetto.
Not in the ghetto?
No.
So you could just be with your family?
Yes, we got around with the friends. We walked around in, as I call it, back. And we just didn't know what's going to happen to us.
Who was in charge of the ghetto? Was it Germans?
Yes, the SS was all around.
And what do you remember of the treatment or the kind of relationship they had to the people?
I don't remember too much at the ghetto, anything so bad. The worst part I remember that I couldn't go to the bathroom because it was an open ground and we were just not able to accept that this is the way we're going to live. But we were not mistreated in the ghetto.
So in 4 weeks, what happened?
For 4 or 5 weeks, they told us that they'd taken us all families to labor camp, and we believed them. And that was the train to Auschwitz, which we didn't know where we're going. Till the morning when we arrived in, that I never forget, the doors were open, and each person was pulled by a soldier, SS, and I never ever see my mother and father or brothers or sisters again. I only stayed close to one of my sisters who was thrown the same direction as I was. And never again I saw anyone else.
So they physically grabbed you?
Physically grabbed and said, you go this way, and evidently whoever they felt it was small children or older, they threw into the gas chamber. And being I was young and my sister, they threw us to a direction where they'd taken us to a different type of camp. And the saddest thing is, which I never forget, we were about 100 young women walking, and the soldiers in each line close to us, and they took us to a huge, big room.
This was before you got onto the train, after you got off
When
of the
we
train?
arrived in Auschwitz, from the train, and they told us that we will have to take all our clothes and jewelry and everything off. It was all women. And this was, we didn't know what we want to cry about, our families or ourselves. We were very young. And then we had to go one by one to another room where they shaved our hair. And they shaved our hair completely. And after then, we all got the striped uniform from Auschwitz. No bra. I don't remember what was our underclothes, but I know it was a striped dress and some shoes, hard shoes. And they took, this took maybe about 3-4 hours. There was lots of women there who already been there for years, and they've been very hardened. And they keep telling us, you're lucky that you don't go to the gas chamber. But we didn't understand what they mean. But after when we were finished, had our hair shaved, and all of us crying, carrying on, we went to a barrack. And that was number 11. It was either 10 or 11, I really can't remember. And there was 1,000 young women in this one barrack. And there was 3 beds lined up, and each one of us, about 10 or 12 of us in a bed, just enough room to squeeze together. And I was there 6 months in Auschwitz.
Can you tell me when you got there, how old you were?
I was about 16, I guess, when I got in Auschwitz.
And your sister was how old?
Maybe she was a little over a year older. She was with me. None of my family I find in this 1,000 cabin, but there was some girlfriends that from our city. But we had a very difficult time to recognize each other. Suddenly, no hair.
Mm-hmm.
And our life there, after 6 months, you would say it was like 10 years. Each day was more critical.
Can you talk about what daily life was like for you?
Yes, in the morning, past 7 o'clock, we had to go out by the side of the barrack, and 2 SS women came and started to count us. And if somebody say anything, they just threaten us that if you don't think this is good enough, wait what you get. There was no mercy. The camp early in the morning was cold. We were freezing. And we realized that we were wired with all the way the camp was wired, that you could not go out or in or anyway. They told us if you touch the wire, you get killed.
And these were German women
All
in charge of you?
SS men and women, mainly women.
Mm-hmm.
And it took them about 2 hours to count us. After that, we went in and we waited for food. Our food was once a day, and it came in a pot, in an old pot, and it was some kind of soup. No bread, nothing. And each bed got 1 pot, so we had to have a little bit of one and give it to the other. Just enough that we didn't die from hunger, we could survive. There was no bathroom. There was a can each end of this barrack, and that's where you went. And every single week, at least once, Dr. Mengele came in his white uniform, and he looked at us. We had to be naked sometime looked at us, wanted to see who he wants to take to gas chamber. Well, I never stayed close to my sister because he always wanted somebody who was related. So fortunately, we were not taken away from each other. But our life, when we looked out, we could see the fume from the gas chamber. And we were told that's what it is, that our parents is in the gas chamber.
By whom were you told that?
But the Führer from the couples
Uh-huh.
would each camp, because they said they have no use for the elderly or for the children.
Mm-hmm. When Dr. Mengele came, was there a procedure, or did he just come to each bed, or how was
No,
it?
they had to stand up. In the middle of the barrack was kind of like a long brick, and we had to stand a line, and he looked us over. And I had a girlfriend that we went to school together that I loved very much, and he took her one day. In different times, we knew that they never come back, whoever he took. But I remember him very well. He was in his 30s.
Mm-hmm. And how often did you say he came?
We saw him at least once a week.
Once a week, and on the average, how many people did he select for the gas
He
chamber?
always took with him a few people. I can't remember how many. And always we had the tragedy to cry. And I remember another thing, that one girl started to scream because her sister they took. And the couple came in and she hit her head against the brick wall. She said, "You can't do that here." So we really, to be honest, we had nothing to do but lay in bed all day.
They didn't put you to work?
No. Auschwitz supposedly was one of the worst concentration camps, where you have enough food that you maybe survive, but no work.
Mm-hmm. So what did you do during the day?
Lay down in hope that someday things would change. That's how I lived there 6 months.
Could you, at Auschwitz, could you move around and talk to whoever you wanted to talk to?
No, we could not go out. But I have to say this because it's a very important thing. One day after we were there by a month or 3 weeks, you see, the women was in one lager, in the next lager were the men. A young woman came and asked me if I had 2 brothers, and we told them yes. And she said that my brothers are in the other camp, that if it's any way we can someday or other run out or tell them what time someday or other they can sneak in, they want to see me.
When you say they were in the other camp, you mean in the men's lager in Auschwitz?
Lager, yes.
And how far away was it from you?
At that point, the men and women, what we find out, were not taken away yet from that same camp. It was just about 2 barracks done. They still were in the sea lager. I was in the sea lager. And they wanted to come to see us, and they did.
Tell me how that happened.
My 2 brothers came to the door. Neither one of us recognized each other. They did not know us except our eyes, and we didn't know them. But my oldest brother took my uniform and started to cry and hugged me, kissed me, and my sister. He said, "We're going to make it through. And please don't fight it." And we kissed and cried, and they left. They were scared because they would have killed him if they find out. And that was the only chance that I have seen my brothers. But Auschwitz was a concentration camp. There was no trees, no birds, and you were separated completely from the whole world. You just wonder, were there any green or trees, or are we going to be ever free? It was hopeless. And to be honest, I never ever thought we were going to get out of there.
Mm-hmm. When they took you out in the morning to count you, were the other buildings so far away that you could not see them at all? Or what did you see when you were outside of the lager?
The barracks were very, very large. I imagine close comparing to an army barracks.
Mm-hmm.
And there was 32 barracks in each camp. We were in the C camp. In this 32 barracks, each one was 1,000 people. And they got that range so that we couldn't see anyone except this 1,000, because they kind of right next to the barracks, so we could not contact anybody.
Mm-hmm.
We also had some Jewish women who came to see us, who were from Czechoslovakia, and they've been there 4 or 5 years, very hardened to the life they lived there. And they told us we will never get out of there.
Where did they come from?
They were already, after 4 or 5 years, they were already couples. They were taking care of the newcomers like us. So we were the last one to come in Auschwitz, the Hungarian Jews.
Let me ask you, inside of your barracks, the 1,000 people inside of your barracks, were you free to go talk to people, and what did people talk about during the day?
We were free, but to be able to survive there, it was so hopeless that some people just went off their mind. No food, not to be able to see anyone else, and not to sleep because there wasn't enough room to sleep. You were lucky if you could just turn to the side. There were 12 of us in each bed, and we had 3 beds in each. So there was just really very little communication. To be honest, I don't remember more than a few people who were close to me in the same bed.
Uh-huh. Do you remember, was there anybody there that was able to reach out to you and give you strength?
No, there wasn't. To be honest, we didn't talk. We thought that they keep telling us, if you don't behave, then you can go to the gas chamber, just like your mother and sisters. There was no hope for us. And it was one day we heard the news after 6 months of hopelessness, and we all lost weight. We all were very thin, that they're going to take us to a working camp. And that was a good news, the day when we went out from Auschwitz.
Okay. I'm going to ask you a couple more questions about Auschwitz, and then we can go on to when you left. Can you remember anything in particular about what the treatment was like there as opposed to before in the ghetto? How were the inmates treated?
I would say they're very, very bad.
How can you be more
They
specific?
beat many young women, and also they took some of the young women that they thought were beautiful, extremely beautiful. They took them out and they told us that these women are going on the front for the soldiers to use them. We will never see them again.
As prostitutes.
Yes, and there was every single day new crisis. It seems like there wasn't a day we haven't lost someone from the 1,000. We have no idea how many percent that left in the barrack during the 6 months, because each day someone was taken out.
Was there a lot of people getting sick?
There was the saddest part is what we had seen. Some of the women who couldn't handle the tragedy, they touched the wires and they got burned. There was an everyday thing because they just hoped that they couldn't live. There was nothing to live for.
And did that kill them, touching the wires?
Yes, it burned them. The electricity was so strong and so tall, there was no way.
You had mentioned earlier that at first you didn't know what they meant by gas chambers. When did you understand what that was?
As we lived in Auschwitz, every single morning when we went to the Appell, that's what they call the Germans, we saw the gas chamber. We saw the smoke was so heavy, like a tremendous fire. That's all we see, the smokes. And it was day and night burning the gas chamber. And they told us our parents or sisters or brothers are all there. Of course, we didn't want to believe it. Being we didn't see it, we always had that hope, maybe.
So describe what happened 6 months later when it was time, when you said they were going to take you to a work camp.
The Germans had an attitude. They always showed you something good before the bad. They put us again to one of those big trains in wagons, and they took us to Stutthof. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Stutthof is close to Danzig, which is in Poland, by the ocean. And we were all 1,000, whoever left in life, we got into the wagon and we went we traveled by day. We got each one a piece of bread and a potatoes to keep us going. And we arrived, which I never forget, to this beautiful camp, the flowers. And we asked, is that where we gonna stay? But all they did is they took us through this beautiful camp where the Germans lived. And then they took us to the concentration camp where we going to live. Stutthof was not any better than Auschwitz. The only thing it was, we didn't have to sleep 12 of us in a bed. It was more room to stay, not much better food, but the dirt was so bad that we got in Auschwitz approximately, I would say close to the end of the year. I don't remember the date. And we were told that we're going to die there from typhus.
When you say the dirt was bad, do you mean that the floor of the barracks was a dirt floor?
There was, from the ocean, that white, sand, and no facility to clean it. And the typhus was already in Stutthof, and we were there. And we were told if we stay over a month, we wouldn't make it. Fortunately, about 3 weeks before that, 3 weeks after we were there, we left Stutthof. But in Stutthof, thousands of young people died from illness, typhus.
So people around you were dying?
Dying like flies, and we had so much lice. All we had to do is just shake our body. We were full of it.
There was no running water at all?
There was no running water. There was one big room that we could go with the SS watching us once in a week and shower.
Mm-hmm. When they first told you that they were going to move you from Auschwitz to Stutthof, did they give a reason?
No.
Not at all?
Never give us any reason.
Were you ever?
We were not treated like human, we were treated like numbers.
Mm-hmm. Were you ever aware of people trying to conduct any kind of religious life at all in the whole experience?
We never even thought of that. The only thing we asked, how can God let young people, parents to die the way they do it? And when we were in Stutthof, we realized that Auschwitz took our families.
How did you realize that?
We were told from, no matter where you were, there always was somebody that had a little softer heart and say, don't worry, another couple months, 6 months, you'll be free. And we have been told what's going to happen. We've been told that one of these days we'll be free if we can just hold him to. And when one person find out, we send a message to all of us.
And that was through other Jewish inmates.
Through other Jewish inmates, but they got the information from Germans. There was always someone who had a little tiny feeling.
Who passed along the
Passed along the information.
I didn't ask you earlier, but in all of your experience, were you always with only Jews, or were there others?
I was always with Jewish people, yes. Always with the Hungarian Jews.
So your sister was still with you?
My sister was still with me. She was always worried about me because she saw that I couldn't eat. And she kept telling me, we go make it, and our brothers will come home, they're young. And maybe our father will come home because he was a strong man. He went through the war. And we had hopes. When you're 16 or 17, you have hopes. And when we were told that we're going to a working camp from there, that's when our hopes start to get better.
But you say you were in Stuttholt for only 3 weeks.
3 to 4 weeks we were in Stuttholt, which was terrible. It was very, very bad condition. The lights was eating people up.
What happened after 3 or 4 weeks?
After 3-4 weeks, we were taken again in wagons. We were never told where we were going. And they took us to a concentration camp named Blomberg. And
do you know where that was?
It was in Poland. And we traveled also maybe another 7-8 hours. And there was not in their concentration camps was never in the city. All you could see is going in, and we were only 1,000 of us there. And that was when life started to get a little hopeful. And we had each 100 person had a barrack. So we had like 3-4 people for a bed. And they told us we're going to work, but we're going to have to go and make the bombs. And they gave us more food than we ever had during our experience. We got bread, we got some potatoes, and we got enough that we could live on.
More than once a day?
I think we got twice in the morning. Also over there, they count you every morning. And it was winter, it was cold.
And you were in the same clothes that they gave you at Auschwitz?
We were changed, but the same uniform, yes. And I never forget when one morning we went to work. And we went into this tremendous factory that was underground. And we were making bombs. And
was this right in the camp that you were in?
No, we walked.
And how far away was the factory?
We walked by an hour. And next to us, the highway was large. And next to us, there was Russian prisoners, French already. We got to see people. And they drove us notes that we should know where the situation is. And that's how we start to find out how far the war is and how much hope they had.
What were in the notes?
Yes,
do you remember?
The notes, the men sent us notes, don't give up. We're going to be free, we're paying back. Please don't give up. They threw us scarves because we were shivering. It was like October and November in Poland, very, very cold. And if they could give us a shawl or something from themselves, they threw it to us to help us. And I was working in this camp, and I remember that I fall asleep all night because I wasn't adjusted to be able to do it with little food. And one day I was working maybe about a month or 6 weeks. One day when we were having the appeal, the contest, I even remember my capo. He was a great big guy. And he said to me, he comes to me as I stand on the line, he said, "Come here." And the Germans always ask the same question, "Hast du Angst?" That means, "Are you afraid?" And you have to tell them no, because if you say yes, it's worse. And my sister thought that they're going to take me away. She fainted in the line. And he said to me, "I'm too young to go to work." And he said, "From now on, about 7 or 8 of us, you go stay home and start a fire," because it was winter, "and clean up the barracks and let the others work." And that was the nicest thing that happened, that I didn't have to go work. And in this camp, we were treated already halfway human.
Let me ask you a couple more questions, just going back when you were talking. You said when you were talking about the prisoners of other nationalities throwing you notes, I didn't get an understanding of where were they and where were you that they had to throw them to.
They were going on the same sidewalk, on the same highway to work. And
into a different building,
into
though.
different buildings.
I see.
And the Russian were treated the worst. They were beaten by the Germans as they walked. And they had to be very careful to help us. They had long hair, beard, they were not shaved. They were treated terrible.
So they were risking a lot by
They were
throwing these
risking
notes.
their life to try to help us.
How could you understand what they had written? Did they write in Yiddish?
No, we had in our 1,000 women, I was between the youngest and another girlfriend of mine, but we had teachers, we had people who read German and English and Polish, and the Hungarian people were quite well educated. And we had all kind of women. They were doctors, they were people who knew languages, and it was very easy to try to, to get communicated from notes.
So how did life change for you once I know what else I was going to ask. He told you that you were too young to work. Were there others who were younger than you? Were there children with you?
No. I and another girl from Nyírbátor, we were the 2 youngest girls in camp, because what happened when I arrived in Auschwitz, the Germans did not ask you, "How old are you?" They didn't ask you what's your name. You were just nothing. They looked at you in 1 second, and if they thought you were young enough, they threw you one way. If they thought you were already too old to survive, they threw you another way. So they had no idea how old I was. But they didn't like old people. They had no use for the older people.
So your feeling
There
is
wasn't too many survivors in Hungary. When I came back, there was very few were my age. Mostly they were either a year too older or quite a bit older.
I see. So how did life change for you when your capo told you that you were too young to work and that you would build these fires and clean up?
It helped me, and I want to tell you something. We went outside in the camp after we cleaned to start a fire, and there were soldiers, German soldiers with guns, who already told us in October and November, don't give up. The war is over for us. We're losing. That the Russians are very close to you. That you're going to be free, we're going to die. And they give us, then when the people came from work, we told them. And each day was a little hope to life that we will survive, that we will not, die in those camps.
What made you accept what they were saying? Why did you think that they were trying to trick you, or what made you feel that they weren't?
I think no matter how bad a population is, or no matter how bad 100 people is, you're going to find one who has some kind of kindness that it's very difficult for them to do the things that they have to do.
And you could tell that there were people like that.
And we could tell that every once in a while we run into a German who had mercy over us and wanted to help us. They were not able, but with their mouths, to tell us that there is hope for us. And I think that's what keeps us going.
So how long was it that you prepared these fires so that there was warmth?
I was there in home about 2.5 months. And one day we had rumors that the Russians are closed and the Americans are closed, that we're going to be free. Because after almost 10 months, what we went through, we eat without a fork, we had forgot the manners, we had to think about all the things that we were able to start life over again. One day we got to be told that tomorrow morning we all gonna get a loaf of bread and potatoes and cheese and certain things, and we gonna start to walk. And that was the brightest day of our life. It was in January, we were freezing. And we all got in line with our little sack in hand. And we started to walk in the morning. Actually, what the Germans done, the highway was large, I remember it very frankly. Next to us were the Russians walking, and the French prisoners walking on the other side, and we walked in the middle. Of course, the Germans were standing by. When we got out of our camp, we walked approximately about 4 and 5 hours.
4 or 5
hours during the day. And it was snowing, cold. And the French prisoners sent us notes and throw us notes in that we should start to plan to escape. See, we didn't know the women. And in fact, it's just like yesterday. It's so bright. The snow must be 10, 12 inch. And we could hear the gunshots. That's how close they were. But the Russian wouldn't leave you. The Germans wouldn't leave you there for the Russian or the American to find you. They were trying to take us away from freedom. That was their policy. So we walked till around 7 or 6 o'clock that night. And each one of us started to talk to each other. And we saw from far back in the sides there were farms, great big farms. And we were having notes written to us from the guys that we're going to escape in so time by the next farm. And I can't exactly remember what time it was, but we lay on the floor. The German SS who was walking with us, they were so scared for their life in both sides. They were already given up. They knew they can't make it. And we lay on the floor and we We cried.
You mean like during a rest stop or something?
No, we just started going out from the lines. The German SS already given up.
How do you mean? How could you tell that?
We knew it. They were not watching us.
Uh-huh.
They were watching themselves.
Uh-huh.
They knew that they will make it, and they start to look away. The soldiers start to go ahead of us, so they had not watched us. So that night, we were about maybe 50, 60 women, and plus about 20, 30 of the French prisoners. And we all went in, crawling between the snow into this big farm. And I never forget when we got in there, the German man who owned the farm said, if you save my life, if we save his life, that they would give us to eat and they would give us everything.
And he meant when either the Russians or the Americans
to come. And it didn't take more than about 2 hours later that the first time in my life I ever see the Russian soldiers with a great big cold hats, because it was cold, with the guns came in like this.
On foot?
On foot. They came in and they all had one person who spoke Russian. We had one who spoke American, French. We had organized it as we went on. And he wanted to know, what is our couple look like? And we told him. And they went out. They said, we don't kill them all. And they went and started to give us food. We all had diarrhea. We were not used to the farmer. They brought us milk and bread. The first time after 10 months, they said, we want you to have everything. And we were all got sick there. But we stayed there about a week to get better.
You said that the farmer was German. Were you in Germany at this point? Or where to your best recollection, were you?
I think that Blomberg was somewhere between the German and Polish border. So there was most likely already Germans, and those Polish people spoke German. It was on the border.
I see.
It was not too far from Danzig, so it must have been on the border. And we lived there for about a week.
And there were about 60 of you.
At least 60 or 80, there was men and women.
And all nationalities?
All nationalities.
All Jews?
No.
No?
We don't know. There was Russian. There was some French, some Russian prisoner. And we all took baths, and we all started to, act like a human being, which was very difficult.
Would you say that the farmer whose farm it was it more that he was interested in not being killed, or did you see him as a fairly kind human being?
No, he was only interested to save his own life, but they killed him.
Who did?
The Russians.
And when did that happen?
Just after a day or so, they killed him. People were like, the Russians and the soldiers, they wanted to take a revenge so bad with the Germans, because the Russian soldiers were treated so horrible that I think they wanted to just do anything to hurt them back. And, they wanted to kill him. In fact, if I remember for sure, there was a Jewish woman from the Russian army was there. And she said, we don't kill him. We don't do anything to hurt him, to pay back for what they done.
And were you aware of how they killed them, or you just didn't see them anymore?
We didn't see them, but there was a lot going on during that period of time, you know. The human life was nothing, really.
You got used to it.
You get used to it. You walk on that body because you want to survive. In fact, going back in Auschwitz, I remember that one time we went out to the bar, when they count us, and there was a trash can, and I was looking if there was anything to eat, because the hunger was so painful that you do lots of things to survive. You eat trash, you eat leaves, anything.
So you say you were there for about a week and you became human again. Do you remember any specific vivid memories about what that was like for you? Do you remember what changed or what your feelings
We had hopes. At that point, we still didn't believe that Auschwitz done what they did to our families. It just, you know, we always think there is hope. And we were hoping, and we already had a coupling chair, maybe 3 inch or hair was growing out, and we were so proud of that. You know, when you're young, somebody shave you to the point they did. And the sad part is that, which happens all the time in life, when people have a real tragedy, they pull together. It makes no difference who you are, or how much you had, or what you did. We all were helping each other to be able to survive, you know. And that's tragedy, brings people together.
What happened after that week?
After that week, we went to Lublin, which is a Polish city by train, because in Lublin, all the people who survived after the war came there.
Was this under the...
Poland. That was in Poland.
I know, but you say we went. Do you mean everybody or just you and your sister?
From my sister, from this group, whoever we were, Jewish, non-Jewish, we were all prisoners of war. And we still were, you know, some of us find something in that house, but most of us still had our prisoner clothes on. And this building was a huge building where the Jewish underground was working already to try to help the people who come there. And over there you find every nationality in the world, and mostly young, because the old one didn't survive. In fact, my husband tells me he was there at the same time in this building. Because we didn't know each other. But and we were treated very well there. They were people there who were trying to help the young one there, you know, in every age, to find out who you are. Do you want to go back to your own country? Do you want to go to Israel? Do you want to go to the United States? And they questioned us. And we told them we want to go back home because we want to see our brothers or parents or someone. And after we stayed there, I think we must have stayed there maybe 4 or 5 weeks. We had food, we had medical help, whoever needed it. And the Polish young men who survived as partisans, who was underground, they were wonderful to the people who were in a concentration camp to try to help us.
And you lived right in this building?
We lived in this building. There was thousands of people there. There was a huge one, and we were fed, and we had medical help, and we were talked to. And they had all kind of Red Cross, and everything was from Jewish people who were trying to help these people what they want to do. Mm-hmm. And after a week, we did decide to go back to Hungary. We took the train and we went back. And that was sad because our home, there was somebody living in our home already, and we knew we wouldn't stay there. So we got another house. And every single day we went twice to the Union Station, to the train, because people were coming home. And the saddest part was that from 10 of us, no one ever came back.
Not one.
And every day when we went with hope, and we came home crying because... So finally, one day, we had someone who came back who was together with my two brothers. And they told us that they lived through the war just like we did. But the last day, as they were supposed to be liberated by the Americans, one was so hungry, he fell, and my other brother tried to help him, and they shot him both. Mm. And these two boys, who were very fine, two young men, was our hope to save, but we never got anyone back.
Did you ever hear specifically about any of the rest of the members of your family?
Yes, I have a cousin who survived. He's in Israel. And we lost 72 people who were grandparents and uncles, cousins. I had an uncle in Budapest who survived, and very little of it, very little. And it was, I think after the war, we had another crisis to be able to accept that they're not going to come back. Mm-hmm. And that was very difficult, very difficult.
What would you say was the most helpful thing to you at that time?
Well, I think we all helped each other. I was going on 17, had no youth, had no between, because in our family life, I was the fourth child and I was a little girl. And it was very difficult I used to cry like every day. Money didn't mean anything to us because we wanted what we couldn't get as our families. Mm-hmm. And I used to see my mother again. I would never wanted anything, but she was only 39 when I saw her last. Mm-hmm. So,
go ahead.
It was tragedy during, but it was a different tragedy after. Mm-hmm. It really, I couldn't laugh. Mm-hmm. Laughing was something that most of us after the war was not able to do. Mm-hmm. It left us a tremendous depression. Mm-hmm.
I want to hear more about that, but when you say there were already other people living in your family's home, were they Hungarians?
Yes, we could have our house back, but at that point we didn't want it. We couldn't face the memories. So the city gave us another lovely home. Awesome. Where we stayed maybe about 5-6 weeks, and we knew we would go to my uncle in Budapest. So we wouldn't stay there. Mm-hmm. The memories were very painful.
And so you just gave it up?
We just gave up. We just walked away. Jewelry, money, didn't mean nothing after the war. Mm-hmm. It was absolutely meaningless, Mm-hmm.
Looking back, how long would you say it was that it took you before you felt
Well,
more?
You see, I got married very young after the war. Actually, I got married when I was a little over 17, 18, so it was needing someone. And all of us were in the same shape. We had no brother, no mother, no father. And we all needed someone to help each other. I think my life started to get happier after I had started a family. I think that was the most precious thing because we felt there was something to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned that the important things in life you cannot replace, you cannot buy it for money.
Mm-hmm.
It made me a better person.
What attitude do you have toward the fact that you were one of the survivors?
I can't change what happened, and if anybody would ask me, I will not deny it. And I think God was very good to us that we survived. There must be a reason why, and I think why. Because if we didn't survive, who would come and tell to the next generation, into the generation after? I talked to my children about it, and about 7, 8 years ago I was speaking at schools. I had quite a few very wonderful experience with youngsters in different schools in Kansas City, Missouri. And if I wasn't involved with my job so much, I really think I would have liked to go on, because I could have helped some of those kids to really know what's all about life.
Mm-hmm. I know you feel that the experience made you a better person. In other ways, do you feel changed, for example, as far as religion goes, or God?
No, I always loved God, and I have prayed to Him. As far as the Jewish religion, I myself am not as religious as my husband, because the reason, when I was a little girl, I always believed it's what you do for others. In the deed that you help your other human being, or help an elderly, or do something for someone, that's the good deed, not just to say I'm a very religious person. And I observe my religion and everything, but I'd rather do something for someone where I feel good that I could help a human being than just saying, oh, I'm religious.
Mm-hmm. How much of your experiences have you told your children?
A lot. Yes, my youngest daughter, Linda, is quite well informed, and I think they know an awful lot. But how can you ever imagine in a normal life that you can go through that and survive? I mean, there are so many people don't believe this never happened. I mean, it's almost impossible for somebody who has a home and live a normal life to believe that you could survive all this.
Mm-hmm.
But we do. Mm-hmm. I think we speak very openly about it.
Mm-hmm. I had forgotten to ask you, did you have a religious education as a child?
Yes, I went to Hebrew school twice a week. I do read Hebrew, but I don't understand well, so I read English mostly. But yes.
Mm-hmm. And for the rest of your schooling, you went to a public school with non-Jewish children?
Yes,
mm-hmm.
with just everyone, yes.
Mm-hmm.
I had a beautiful home life, and I think wonderful parents, and I think my background did help me to go through and be strong.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel that your experiences in the war changed you in any other way that you haven't spoken about yet?
No, I'm really not bitter. I believe that there must be a reason why these things have to happen. Maybe the reason that I think that now we should be aware of it, that it should never happen again. And when you ask me to come and speak about all this experience, the only reason I wanted to do it because one of these days, maybe 5, 10, 20 years from now, the young generation have to know that yes, it did happen, and we have to be alert it shouldn't happen again.
Mm-hmm. How did you, or how do you feel about American Jews once you came over here and settled in Kansas City and
I
so
think
on?
they were very helpful, very wonderful to us, and we were very fortunate that we went to work right away and we stand on our own feet. And it was a very difficult beginning. I came to this country, I spoke fluent Italian, German, Hungarian, but I couldn't speak a word English.
Mm-hmm.
And it was rough. I was young, with the experience behind me. But we made it, we worked hard, raised a lovely family, and I'm very proud of it.
When did you and your husband decide to come to the United States?
When we were in Italy, we both wanted to come to America. For some reason or other, that's what we wanted to do. And we loved this country from the day on, and we're happy that they accepted us. Really.
And what year was it that you came?
We came to this country in 1949 in November, by the 25th or 28th of November.
Mm-hmm. So about
Almost 40 years.
And you left your uncle's house to go to Italy, is that right?
Yes, we left from Budapest. We went to Italy and we waited till our papers were ready to come to this country.
And how long was that?
We were there 3 years.
3 years in Italy.
From 1946 till 1949.
And where?
And they were good years. The Italian people was absolutely wonderful to the refugees. They treated us with love and care. And I have very good memories of the Italian people.
And what city in Italy?
We lived in Florence. My oldest daughter was born in Florence. It was good memories. They were wonderful to us. They're good people.
One other question. How do you feel that non-Jewish or Jewish people have been affected by the Holocaust? Do you have an overwhelming feeling about that?
You mean that you tried to find out if there was lots of non-Jewish people too?
No, I mean just in general, the non-Jewish community in the world or the Jewish community in the world.
I believe that the people who are not ignorant, I believe they have great passion for the people who went through the war. And I do believe that we are so much better off today than 40 years ago for the simple reason we learn to live with each other without hate. I believe that the Gentile people are just as good of people as I am, and we can be friends. And truly, I think it helped not to have the hate for each other, which we were separated so badly before the war. Not the Hungarian people. We lived much better relation with the Gentile people, but Poland.
Mm-hmm.
The Jewish people were very segregated.
Mm-hmm.
And the hate was building up.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that the human like we are, I think I respect that synagogue helping the Christians or Christians helping the Jews. I think that's a great advantage for all of us.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to ask you to do one last thing, and that is to give the names of your mother and father and your brothers and sisters.
I will give you the name of my father. His name was Adela Kraus, and my mother was Regina Kraus. And I had a brother, the two oldest brothers. One was Erne and the other was Morris. And then I had, my sister's name is Rose. And then I had, one was Sholem. And you know, it's very embarrassing. But being they were so close to each other and it's been so long ago, I had a very difficult time to remember everyone's name. I had a little sister. We were 4 girls and 6 boys. Her name was Eva. And one was Leah. But I can't remember all the little brothers' names.
And who were the 2 brothers who came to visit you that time?
This was Morris and Erne. They were both older.
The older ones.
They were older.
And tell just briefly, I guess, what happened to your sister. I imagine when you married in Budapest and went to Italy, what happened to her?
She lives in New York. She got married, and she has her own family, and we're very close.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, and I hope it will help. It was my pleasure.
In Jewish life, we light a candle on the anniversary of a death of a loved one. Tonight, we come to remember the Holocaust and to remember those who perished during the Nazi reign of terror. Let us vow never to forget their lives who are symbolized by these flames. Their memory shall burn bright throughout all time. We light a candle for the children, infants to teenagers, who perished before they really had a chance to live. This candle signifies that you are not forgotten. We light a candle for the mothers and fathers, powerless to protect their children. This candle signifies that you are not forgotten. We light a candle for the rabbis, teachers, and scholars, the greatest centers of learning in all Jewish history, perished with them. This candle signifies that you are not forgotten. We light a candle for the untold millions for whom there is no one to mourn, whose entire families were annihilated, and who lie in unmarked graves. This light signifies that you are not forgotten.
We light a candle for those who stood upright while others were bending to immoral will, for the righteous among the nations who risked and even gave their lives to help their fellow human beings. This light signifies that you are not forgotten. We light a candle for the soldiers who liberated the camps and who served with the Allied forces to put an end to tyranny and oppression. This candlelight signifies that you are not forgotten. We light this seventh candle for those who live even now under the yoke of oppression, in places where the threat of genocide is real and ever present. This candle light signifies that you are not forgotten. This year marks the 77th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. Remembering this continuing challenge to all of us, but in the light of the candle strengthens our spirit. To honor the sanctity and dignity of every human life, we must teach tolerance and respect for every person, regardless of race, color, or creed. May we never forget.
It's a reading of First They Came by Pastor Martin Niemöller. It says, "First they came for the communists, but I did not speak out because I was not a communist. Then they came for the socialists, but I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me."
Silence. Where in the Holocaust is the word of God? The world was silent, the world was still, and now survivors stammer, their words are haunted. Behind the silence, a witness to the sin of silence. And in the camps and streets of Europe, mother and father and child lay dying, and many looked away. To look away from evil, is this not the sin of all good people? In this poem by Elie Wiesel, we are reminded of the destructive potential in silence. This Yom HaShoah, as with every Yom HaShoah, we refuse to be silent about the horrors of the Holocaust. and hope that we all can take comfort from the fact the larger Wichita community also refuses to be silent. Today we are reminded that we must never be silent or still or look away from evil at the atrocities taking place in our world today, even at this very hour.
El malei rachamim, shochein bamromim, amtzei menucha nechona, tachat konvei hashchina, b'malot kiddushim hatoharim, gezohar akiyah mazirim, et nishmot kol acheinu b'nei Yisrael, anashim, nashim v'taf, shenitbechu, v'shenechneku, v'shenisrafu, v'shenehergu, b'gan Eden, tehim menuchatam. Ana b'harachamim, hastirem b'setek nafecha le'olamim, u'tzror b'tzror hachayim, et nishmoteihem. Adonai hu nachalatam, v'yanuchu v'shalom al mishkavoteihem v'namar Amen.
Exalted, compassionate God, grant perfect peace in your sheltering embrace among the holy and pure, to the souls of all our brethren, men, women, and children of the house of Israel, whose radiance is like that of the heavens, who were slaughtered and suffocated and burned to ashes in the Shoah. May the Garden of Eden be their resting place. Please, Master of Compassion, shelter them under the wings of your divine presence, and may their memories and stories endure forever, inspiring truth and loyalty in our lives and the lives of our children. May their souls thus be bound up in the bond of life. May they rest in peace, and let us say, Amen.
The prayer we are about to recite dates back in some form almost 2,000 years, and in this form, about half that. We say these words when we remember those who have gone from this life, however they have passed, whether advanced of years in their bed, surrounded by family, or ripped cruelly from the arms of their loved ones, to be tortured and slaughtered by those who have begrudged the Jew our very place on this earth. These words, which do not mention death at all, are spoken with a threefold purpose: to ease the passage of the deceased, to give comfort to the living, and of course, to sanctify the divine, expressing hope that a future peace will come speedily. Talmud suggests that we should say these words b'chol kocho, with all their might, as we concentrate on those who were slaughtered by evil, as we focus on what we can do to remember and cause to be remembered, as we commit to oppose such hatred wherever it may rise. Let us say with all our might the words of the Kaddish prayer. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabba, ba'alma divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon uv'yimeichon uv'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael, ba'agala uvizman kariv, v'imru amen. Yehi shmei rabba mevarach la'alam ulalmei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach, v'yitba'ar v'tromam v'yitnaseh, v'yithadar v'yitale v'yithalal shemei dekudesha barichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechamata, damiran ba'alma v'imru amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shamaya v'chayim, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'al kol ha'amim, v'imru amen.